At the Graduate School of Public Policy at the University of Tokyo, and I am one of the convener of this workshop. So thank you very much for coming for the final day of this IAC meeting. And as an introduction, I'd like to give you the idea why we organize this kind of event and what kind of purpose we have in mind for facilitating a discussion among the experts in this region. And after that, I also would like to introduce what we'd like to discuss today. And this is the kind of the opening event for the Space Policy and Law Academic Network in Asia Pacific. We call it SPRANUP. It's a little bit long word, but this is the kind of thing we'd like to establish together with colleagues in this region. As you see in the other back side of the program, we have a kind of the draft charter of this SPRANUP, and I'd like to pick up some of the points we'd like to pursue using this platform. As the name shows, this is the kind of the platform or the network among academic researchers in this region. So we'd like to emphasize academic networks. So of course we deal with the law and the policy issues somehow relevant to the government level, but we try to facilitate the frank exchange of the opinion and the academic discussion among the scholars. That's one of the points we'd like to emphasize here. And the other point is that this is the Space Policy and Law Academic Network. So there are many established groups relating to the space law discussion, but in addition we would like to add some element relating to the policy issue. Of course, the policy is the kind of broader issue, so we have to be cautious about which aspect to be incorporated. But the point is that we'd like to discuss about the intersection between the law and the policy. So we'd like to cultivate the interface area in the interface between those two fields. So this is the kind of the general idea for setting up this platform. Actually, the idea originally we discussed when the University of Tokyo organized a workshop relating to space policy in February this year. And after that, also, we have conference in Tokyo, especially under the leadership of the Keio University, Professor Setsuko Aoki, when the international law moot court was held relating to the Asia-Pacific region last June. So based on the discussion, we thought that maybe setting up this kind of informal platform might be a good idea to facilitate the discussion among ourselves. And this is the kind of a factual background, and also the kind of policy background behind that was that actually myself is not, I'm working for the law faculty, but I'm not a lawyer, political scientist. But the reason why we are interested in setting this kind of the platform is that so far, especially in the space policy area and the space agency, we have been focusing on the technology development and the scientific aspect of the space policy. That's of course important, but on the other hand, also we recently emphasized the kind of the social implementation of technology in the societal context. So there are many policy discussions relating to what is the social benefit of the kind of technology introduction, or what the risk relating to that. The kind of the social embeddedness or institutionalization is another important aspect we have to think. So this kind of platform might be a good kind of the counterpart together with the scientific and technological development if we have that kind of the platform to facilitate the institutional infrastructure, especially in the Asia-Pacific country, emerging region. That might be a good complementary development. That's what we hope for setting up this kind of the platform. And this is the kind of general idea. And today, this is the kind of the first, this kind of the open the workshop we first organized. And today we have Dr. Tanya from the International Institute of Space Law. She will give us kind of the complimentary address. Then after that, we have the representative from the three countries, the Professor Ruti from India, and we have the Miss Olga Polenskaya from Russia, and also we have Ms. Motoko Uchitomi from the University of Tokyo. So today we asked them to give us a kind of the policy development in those 3 countries, and we'd like to organize a kind of general discussion based on that. And that's the way we are thinking at this moment. So first, I'd like to ask Dr. Tanya Matsuntsuwa, the President of International Institute of Space Law, to give us an address, please.
Yeah. Okay, thank you very much for your kind words, and I would like to start first of all by congratulating you on this initiative of establishing the Space Policy and Law Academic Network of Asia Pacific. I think it is an extremely good initiative. The Asia Pacific is a very large region geographically, and it is also a very diverse region in terms of economies and politics and systems, governance systems, and also in the field of space activities and also in the field of space law. We have some countries in the region that have very established space programs, and also many other countries that are newcomers in the space field. And we see the same thing in the field of policy and law. There are some countries that are here also represented on the panel, for instance, of course, mainly Russia, which has had a comprehensive legal system since many years, and others that do not have yet any legislation, even if they do sometimes have space activity. One of the most recent developments was that Indonesia adopted its space legislation a few months ago. So I believe that the countries in this region can learn from each other, and of course having such a network will help to create communication and will also create interaction. And then the academics are going to be able to advise their governments. At least that is, for instance, what happens in my country. Very often when they have questions about how to settle certain activities, they will turn to the academics and ask them for advice. So if there is some consultations at the academic level by this network, which is, as I understand it, mostly an email exchange of information on, for instance, publications or theses or activities, I think that will help to promote more understanding and cooperation in the region. We have, of course, several institutions in Asia Pacific that deal with cooperation at the perhaps technical level, such as APSCO or APSRAF forums that do not, however, specifically deal with policy and law. So therefore, I want to give you my warm congratulations on that. As the International Institute of Space Law, I would also like to support this initiative, and as discussed with Motoko already, we could look into some activities that we could organize jointly. I'm very happy that we have a very good representation of this region in the board of directors of the IASL. We have the vice president, Mr. Murthy, next to me, who is from India. And it is actually the first time in the history, more than 50 years history of the IASL, that we have a vice president from the Asian region. In addition to which we also have a board member from China and 2 board members from Japan, one of whom is in this room, who was just elected this elections, Professor Hashimoto. And so we are very fortunate to have an excellent representation of the important and large Asia-Pacific region in our board. And also we have had many activities in this region. It is perhaps slightly related to the fact that I lived in the Asia-Pacific region myself, living in Singapore for 6 years. And in that context organized several regional conferences of the IASL. Starting in 2001 with a conference in Singapore. And since then we organized 2 conferences in Thailand, in Bangkok and in Chiang Mai, and one in Beijing. And so we have had a number of successful events that each time would bring academics from the region, so we could see this perhaps as the foreground of this initiative, to discuss topics of mutual interest for the region. So often these conferences focused on issues like telecommunications or disaster management or other topics that are of specific interest for the region. And we have published some proceedings of those events which are available on our website, and I hope that those can also serve as some input for the SPLANUP forum and help you to create this and to develop this further. Of course, also we have the moot court that you have already mentioned. The Manfred Laks Space Law Moot Court competition has a very, very active and blossoming Asia-Pacific regional round, which is actually the largest of the 4 regional rounds. We have more than 20 teams, and we have national rounds taking place both in India and in China because there are simply too many teams. And so this is really something that you should also use your network for. The Asia-Pacific round of the competition was established in 2000, and we have been extremely fortunate that JAXA, the Japanese Space Exploration Agency, has supported the winners of this Asia-Pacific round each year to participate in the IAC to represent the Asia-Pacific region. I'm very hopeful that having had the round in Tokyo this year will also help to build further the capacity, and that we will have Japanese teams in the finals as well. We have already seen a large increase of capacity in, for instance, the Chinese participation, where through the participation in the competition, the teams have really grown and increased their performance, so that even there was now a finalist from China that almost made it to Beijing. So all these activities, I believe, are helping to build the capacity, and we will be very, very happy to work together with SPLANUP and to explore possibilities for mutual activities. So once again, warm congratulations and good luck, and I look forward to hear more about your plans. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So now we'd like to turn to Professor Murthy to give us the policy recent discussion in India. Yes, yeah.
Good afternoon, Professor Shiroyama, Madam Tanya. I also recognize the chairman of our Committee on Peaceful Uses of Outer Space. Welcome, sir. We are honored by your presence. And esteemed friends, I'm extremely happy that this network among the Asia-Pacific countries have been formed with the initiative of Professor Shiroyama, and it is very timely and relevant, as mentioned by Madam Tanya, because Asia-Pacific region is teeming with the capabilities and activities of several countries, extending to all branches of space activity. What I will be doing in the next few minutes is to give you an overview of the developments in India, particularly in the field of space policy and law. Of course, India is yet to have its own national space legislation, and I hope that in future possibly India will also have that. Indian space program is 50 years old just this year. In 1963, it started with the launch of the sounding rocket, which was brought from US by Kapapchi, and since then it is developed into a well-integrated program covering all branches of space activity, probably with the exception of the manned space activity. It is an application-driven program. The program is predominantly public-funded, although today many industries, as many as 500 industries, both big and small, participate in the space activities in India. The cumulative spending up to the 11th five-year plan, that is up to 2012 April has been 471 billion Indian rupees. About 60 Indian rupees make $1 roughly, you know. Through this budget, of course, which was very modest in the initial periods, today the annual budgets are about less than $1 billion in India. It has accomplished 67 satellite missions, 37 launch missions from India, and also it has launched 35 foreign satellites into space using particularly the Polar Satellite Launch Vehicle, which has been a very successful launch vehicle with 21 successive successes so far. Coming to the very recent developments, India has also got into the field of navigation satellite space segment for positioning, and the first satellite, it has planned a regional system, not a global system, but a regional system which can extend positioning services up to 1,500 kilometers, say, from Indian region. And the first satellite has been launched recently, and it has been successfully put into space in the coming years. Up to 2016 or so, the rest of the 6 more satellites will be launched in this series to make the total system. Recently, a very state-of-art satellite, INSAT 3D, has also been launched. This has a sounding capability. It can take measurements at different heights of the atmosphere, and also it has capability to have the very high resolution radiometer images. This is very useful for tracking extreme events like cyclones. India also has another maiden launch with respect to having a defense telecom satellite, dedicated satellite for defense services. It is a telecom satellite for their use. This is GSAT-7. It was launched by Ariane launch vehicle recently. There was also a joint mission in the February of this year with Canas, having an oceanographic payload, Argos payload from Canas, and also this satellite included a K-band altimeter, which can precisely determine the wave heights in seas. There is also a very good progress with respect to GSLV, geostationary launch vehicle. Of course, the launch was scheduled, but due to a small problem, it was postponed, and we are expecting that in December this launch will take place. So this year has been a very good year for the Indian space program. Indian space program has long-term direction, essentially to use space as a tool for economic as well as social development, and of course at the same time to promote international cooperation in doing these activities. For the next 5 years, of course, the outlook for resources, at least the initial projections, was more than double of what was for the previous 5 years, but there has been resources crunch. They will not be able to get what they have asked for. What is expected could be still indicate a growth with respect to the past 5 years. India has a satellite communication policy. Basically, this policy allows the use of the public funded satellite infrastructure for the use of the private sector, because there are no private sector satellites, communication satellites in India, and the policy allows that. And also the policy enables any private industry to invest into a communication satellite system. That is the two enabling provisions of the policy. So far, it was not successful in attracting the private sector investing into the satellite infrastructure, satellites in space. Most of the private sector investments have been on the ground, essentially for the services. There has been tremendous growth in the television and direct-to-home services in India, and the market is expected to be something like $400 billion by the year 2017. There are 130 million television homes in India, so the transponder requirement is very high, 270 plus. This is a survey done by a professional agency, and today the supply from the public infrastructure is only expected is about 50 transponders. So there is a tremendous opportunity for the commercial systems to provide this gap in the demand which is there in India. Essentially, that is possible. Already many global companies are providing services. In remote sensing data policy, India itself has a fleet of satellites covering both optical and the microwave region. It also receives data from global systems like digital globe. Right now the policy allows up to 1 meter resolution. The data is available freely on non-discriminatory basis, beyond which it goes through a kind of screening for the genuineness of the use because of the security concerns. The other important policy initiative which is now in India is to evolve a national geographic information system. A policy study has also been carried out, and this policy report is in public domain. It is put into the net, so any of you can refer to the documents on this. Essentially, it is to enable GIS ready data to be available to any user for the purpose of governance, for the purpose of business, and for the citizens even. The Indian policies on technology transfer and industry cooperation, of course, it is to attract more and more industries to participate in space project activities and add value and create the spin-off benefits. And private sector, of course, is very active, as I said, in space-based services like telecommunications, like use of Earth observations data. Also, we have domestic regulations which have come to take care of the concerns on the dual use concerns. There are rules relating to non-proliferation, dual use of the technologies that are used in space, particularly in the context of technology transfers to industries and so on. International cooperation is a very important aspect of Indian space policy. There are bilateral agreements with a number of agencies. In addition, India is also actively cooperating with UN COCOAS, ITU, IADC, all these global fora which are very important, and particularly in our region, in capacity building, India has a lot of initiatives in terms of reaching out its knowledge to the other participants. There are many initiatives in the next 3-4 years which are identified, which include even joint missions, particularly in India is planning to have a Mars orbiter mission. So essentially, it would like to see whether there could be complementarity between the NASA's missions or the missions by other agencies even when such missions are planned. So it is an important activity. The other important aspects of the policy is the protection of space environment. International community shares great concern on maintaining the space environment to make it sustainable, space activities sustainable for future. In that context, it follows very meticulously the guidelines that are evolved. Although they are not legally binding guidelines, there is much emphasis to make sure they are implemented very carefully. So this is the summary of the thing. And there is recently a committee on national space legislation. ISRO has initiated this committee under the chairmanship of Dr. M.I.S. Prasad, who is also a member of IASL, and we hope that in the next couple of years or so there will be a serious effort for bringing the national space legislation in India. Thank you very much.
From all my heart with the organizers of this great event, and I'm really honored to be here and to be one of the founding fathers, or fathers maybe, of this Plan-Up Forum. And I'm really looking forward to the great results of its work. And for me, in my current capacity, I'm representing now two institutions actually. The one is the Russian Foreign Trade Academy, institutional educational organization, and the other one is the Russian Federal Space Agency, Roscosmos. And in Roscosmos, I'm International Law Counsel, dealing primarily with space law. And it's even harder for me to make this presentation because Russia, as Professor Masonov has already told us, is in a very complicated geographical position. That is, it occupies both Asia, part of Asia, and part of Europe, and is at the edge of all the things that are happening in both in these both regions of the world. So I'll try to say a few words and to present the most important features of the latest space policy and law in Russia. And in particular, I would like to draw your attention to the new political base of Russian space law, which has been changed recently, and with the coming restructuring of the very field of space activities in Russia. And let's start with the policy itself. So on this chart you can see the overview and the hierarchy of the main documents, political documents, which form the political grounds for all space activities in Russia. And I would like to say that these documents are covering only the civil and commercial part of space activities, but not the military ones, because in Russia military space activities are performed only by the Ministry of Defense. They're pure capability, and Roscosmos has nothing to do with that. Only in certain cases when some projects deal with the dual-use satellites, but only like this. So let's start with the top document. It's a state program of the Russian Federation, space activity for 2013-2020. This is a comprehensive document which comprises all factors concerning space activities. That is technical, financial, legal aspects, all in all. So to say, this document is a reference book of all the political instruments, political plus legal plus financial instruments, which cover all directions of space activities. That is satellite navigation, communication satellites, observation satellites, launching of course, plus commercial missions, as I've already said. The next goes the document called, pretty long name, it's Keystones of State Policy of the Russian Federation in the area of space activities till 2030, and with a further perspective. I would like to say more words about this document. It was adopted this April and is really a breakthrough in Russian space policy, because this is the very first political document which is absolutely open to the public. The whole text is open. And unfortunately for now it's only in Russian, but we're preparing an official English translation and it will be officially published on the Roscosmos website. So I'll invite you to get acquainted with this document very soon. And it is really interesting in respect that compared to all the previous documents on space policy of Russia plus the former Soviet Union, this is the very first political document whose main task and the main direction is to promote international cooperation of Russia and to provide openness of the Russian Federal Space Agency to foreign countries, to share our view on space activities, to participate more actively in international projects like this Plan-Up, for instance, as well. And these keystones of governmental state policy of Russia cover the most important directions for space activities, the principles, the main phases of space activities, including the separation of the phases, for instance, construction of the Vostochny Cosmodrome, the enlargement of satellite constellations, including the GLONASS constellation, Earth observation, remote sensing constellations, and the creation and production for the use of new prospective launchers, and so on and so forth. So everything in this document is structured very well and covers all of the areas and directions of Russian space activities. So it's a very interesting document. And then go three federal programs. In the middle is the cornerstone of the Russian space activities, the Federal Space Program, till 2015. The main feature of this document is that it's, of course, it's political, but the main aim of this document is to provide the technical overview of the Russian space activities. And it is subdivided into numerous directions, into numerous clauses and chapters. However, I don't know, unfortunately or not, but it is not available to the public because there are some figures which, for some political reasons, cannot be revealed to the public. Though there is also an overview of the essence of the Federal Space Program, and it's also published on Roscosmos website. However, in Russian only, but pretty soon, I think, and I hope by the end of this year, it will be translated, officially translated into English, and will become available. And as to the rest, two federal task programs, they are pretty specific. One is dedicated to the development of the GLONASS system, the global navigation satellite system of Russia. And the other one is dedicated to the development of Russian cosmodromes. And this program is targeted, first of all, for the development of the new Vostochny Cosmodrome in Siberia, and as well for the development of the use of Baikonur Cosmodrome in Kazakhstan. Then let's move on to an overview of space law in Russia. And I would like to say that the structure is pretty clear and the hierarchy is evident. And I would like also to mention that the first political document, the first instrument on space law in Russia, and that it was the Soviet Union, was adopted in 1947. It was a secret document signed by Chairman Stalin at that time. And it was the very first legal instrument in the Soviet Union which provided for creation, establishment of the Russian rocket and space industry. So, here on this chart, you can see the following situation with space law in Russia, the following hierarchy. At the top of space law in Russia is the Constitution of the Russian Federation, adopted in 1993. And there are two major provisions in the Constitution which concern directly space law. The first one is that all international space law, international law treaties and principles have a greater legal force than all the rest of the Russian legislation. That is why, as you can see here, on the first line is international space law plus general accepted principles of international law. Of course, so we know international space law is part of public international law. And that is why I put it like this. And all the rest of space legislation in Russia and other branches of legislation in Russia go after international law and international space law according to the Constitution. And the second important point, which is also reflected in the Constitution, is that all decision-making and all law-making process on space law and on any matters concerning space activities can be done only at the federal level. That is, at the level of the president, the government, and federal ministries and agencies. No local governments have this opportunity or authority to promulgate or adopt any legislation on space law matters. This is also very important and proves the strategic nature of space activities for Russia. So, as to international space law, Russia is a member of 4 of the 5 fundamental space treaties, but for the Moon Agreement. I think all of you know the reasons, or most of you, it's only political reasons in the first place. Then go federal laws and codes. And the main one is the law on space activities. This was adopted in 1993 and has been amended numerous times. And the last amendment was last year, and it concerned the Russian fund on space activities. However, it didn't work out, but it's another story. If anyone is interested, I can talk about it a bit later. So then go regulations by the president, and here I give an example, a 2005 decree of the president of the Russian Federation on the federal space program of Russia. It's like a legal tradition in Russia that all space programs, any political documents in Russia, have to be promulgated by the president, by the presidential decree. Then go regulations by the government. The government passes regulations, decrees or ordinances as a development of presidential decrees. So here I give an example, the 2007 decree by the government of Russia on the use of the GLONASS system in the socio-economic development of the Russian Federation. And the last tier, the fifth tier, is regulations by the federal ministries and agencies. And as you know, the main ministry, or that is agency in Russia dealing with space, is Roscosmos, and as to space law, have an international cooperation and treaties department and an international law division in this department, international space law division. And here I give one example of the act by Roscosmos, the 2010 administrative regulation on registration of space objects. As well, Roscosmos had already passed regulations, or like these, administrative regulations on licensing of space activities, on the launch of spacecraft, on unmanned launch, on the preparation and training of cosmonauts, and some others. So the major amount of all space legislation is on this very level, on the fifth tier, and made by Roscosmos. Let's move on. Here we can see who is actually responsible for decision-making and the lawmaking process in Russia. As you have already understood from the previous slide, at the top of the system is the President of the Russian Federation, and it is the person who defines the policy of Russia in the area of space and sets the ultimate goals of Russian space activities. Then goes the government of the Russian Federation. Then, this is an intricate point, and I would like also to draw your attention to this. Then goes the Minister of Foreign Affairs. In 2011, the President of the Russian Federation passed a decree stating that all international activities, including international space activities, shall be, so to say, authorized by the Minister of Foreign Affairs. But in reality, in practice, it means that the ministry has to be aware of everything, of all contacts with foreign partners, of all contracts as well that are being signed or are prepared to be signed, of any projects or programs, bilateral, multilateral, so on and so forth. We just have to notify them about that, and they get involved only on very special issues. For instance, if we are dealing with the UN COPUOS with legal subcommittees and promote some new ideas, new development there on the UN level. Only in this case, the Minister of Foreign Affairs is at the head of this work and at the head of the Russian delegation. And they're responsible for this the top-level work of space activities. And then the final tier is, of course, Roscosmos, the Federal Space Agency, which is responsible for all, as I already said, all civil and commercial space activities in Russia. And here I would like to say a few words also about the current situation of space law teaching in Russia. Unfortunately, after the collapse of the Soviet Union in 1991, there was a depression, I can say so, a depression in teaching of space law, because many professors leave this area of science for instance, for the field of oil and gas and other more profitable branches of law, I mean in the sense of teaching and getting some benefit from that. However, we still have three main universities, as you can see here. The main is the Russian Foreign Trade Academy. It's targeted at the practical preparation, practical education of people. First of all, from the point of view of participating in foreign economic relations. Then goes the Russian People's Friendship University, RUDN, and by the way, one of the greatest professors on space law in Russia and Soviet Union, Professor Gennady Zhukov, works in this university. Next year, next April, he celebrates his 90th anniversary, but he's still very active and reads lectures and promotes the studies of space law. And Professor Zhukov works in this university, and he is the key person on space law who is responsible for further development of space law science in Russia. And he was the initiator of the initiative of combining the teaching on space law in all these three universities, so kind of making a network of the three universities. By the way, all of them are situated in Moscow. And the next one, the last actually, for now, it's Moscow State University for International Relations. And here in this university, another great professor of space law, so was very famous in the Soviet times because he participated in almost all negotiations on the fundamental space law treaties. Professor Kolosov, Yuri Kolosov, works there and also reads lectures on space law. And Professor Kolosov is 79 years old this year, so you can imagine that. We've been having a gap in teaching space law, and thanks to these professors and thanks to the three universities which understand the importance of space law and understand the importance of promoting the, so to say, cadre or personnel potential in Russia. They have reserved these space law courses, and we still do have space law in Russia thanks to these people and these universities. And I'm really looking forward to further development of space law teaching in Russia and involving more and more universities. For instance, the St. Petersburg State University, who is also really interested in space law, and by the way, their teams have already participated in the Manfred Laxmut court, and they have achieved distinctive results, and we're also very happy for them. And now we're in the process of developing this scientific network of universities in Russia. Oh, by the way, I should also mention the Novosibirsk State University. It's in Siberia, so you can see that the geographical distribution of space law teaching is now larger and larger, and we are promoting it as well. So I'm really hoping to see new generation of space lawyers in Russia in the near future. And on my behalf, as representative of the space law science in Russia and also as a representative of the governmental body Roscosmos, I'm making every effort to help this process. Thank you very much for your attention. Once again, I would like to thank you for this invitation and my participation here. I would be happy to answer your questions, if any. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any questions or comments? I have one question that you mentioned that you still have a very famous senior international space lawyer, but on the other hand, after the collapse of the Soviet Union, the many experts are moving to the more profitable sector. And the kind of, how to say, the kind of aging issue, aging population, expert population, how to transfer the kind of knowledge to the more younger generation, maybe the same kind of issue might have, not just in the legal training area, more the technical area also. The Russia have the same kind of problem. So how to face that kind of issue and how to tackle with that? If you have any view on that issue, please let us know.
Thank you for your question. It's very important. And I would like to highlight how this process of renewing the age or lowering the age of space lawyers in Russia is being done now. First of all, it's thanks to the new space program in Russia and the more openness of our space program and our space initiatives to the world and to the universities in the first place, more closer cooperation between science, government and business in the space area. More and more people, more and more students get involved and get interested in space law, and they themselves approach our renowned professors with the desire to maybe to write theses on space law or prepare some other works. some publications on space law. And in Roscosmos, we have an initiative on promoting the participation of young scholars into various initiatives by Roscosmos, including those really very specific and technical. For instance, the work on the development of the GLONASS system, or on the possible accession of Russia to the space protocol, to the Cape Town Convention on mobile equipment. And we involve a lot of students and attract them to this work, and they're also very happy to show them, and they're becoming professionals in this area, and thanks to them, thanks to their example, more and more people and new students come to Roscosmos and get our help. And we're also trying to, now we're trying to launch, find opportunities to launch a grant program for our students. First of all, we're interested, of course, in technical specializations, for instance, from the Moscow Bauman University on technology. And now, actually, it's me who is promoting this direction. I'm interested in pure space lawyers, who are not just technicians, but in first place space lawyers. And I'm working closely with all these 3 universities and promoting for a kind of summer school in Roscosmos, under the auspices of Roscosmos in Moscow, for our students. And I'm also looking forward to invite foreign professors, space law professors, to help us to overcome this spirit and to bring more spirit in these studies on space law, and of course to broaden this network and to enumerate the number of future space lawyers and students interested in space law.
Okay, so thank you very much, and now we'd like to move to the final
technology activity of space, but nowadays Japanese universities are also interested in space law and policy research activities. So Keio University established Space Law Center headed by Professor Aoki and providing master course for space law. And I'm giving a small lecture on space law there. And also, University of Tokyo started a space policy research group headed by Professor Shiroyama. And I'm also giving a lecture at Tokyo University for discussing space policy in Japan, together with Dr. Nagai. So now, in comparison with 2 presenters, Professor Murti and Ms. Olga of Volenskaya, in India, I feel space policy and law is developing very quickly and timely. And also, Russia has a long-term history of space law and policy and very comprehensive. Now I feel, I must say, Japanese space law and policy is developing rather slow, unfortunately, I feel. So I'd like to introduce to the audience today's situation of Japanese space law and policy and its governance. So the turning point was 2008. Japanese government went diet for the basic space law in 2008. The main purpose of it is to define new objectives of Japanese space activities. In Japan, in long-time history, we have R&D, the space activity for R&D, and that R&D is itself is objective of Japanese space activities. But nowadays, Japanese space activity has developed enough, so decided to shift to the utilization, especially for national security, for peaceful purposes. That is non-aggressive one, peaceful purposes, but anyway, to utilize space infrastructure for national security reason, and also diplomacy, which means international cooperation, especially for Asia-Pacific region, and also to fostering industry. And so that basic space law established strategic headquarters, and also under the basic space law, basic plan, annual 5 years basic plan scheme has started. And then basic space law also is instructed to the reform of the space governance within about 1 year, which is finally done last year. Because of the political confusion, it takes more than 1 year, but anyway, last year, the space governance was reformed. And also it instructed to create regulatory regime for space activities, which is domestic regulations, domestic act, within about 2 years. But unfortunately, it has not yet done. So, 2008 strategic headquarters for space policy is chaired by Prime Minister, and the Vice Chairman is Minister for Space, and members are all other ministers. That means this is a very high level and very political one. So that is because many minister relating to some aspect of space activities. So the creation of strategic headquarters realized a kind of unified space policy in Japan. And also it produced a basic plan on space policy, and now we start the second term from this April. So then I return to the last year's reform of Japanese space governance. So the law in June 2012 authorized Cabinet Office to take more control of space policy. And then Cabinet Office established the Office of National Space Policy, and that is a coordination body for all the ministry for the, which is relating to not only R&D but also utilization for activity by the Japanese government. And also it established a committee on national space policy by the professor, including Professor Aoki or opinion leaders in Japan. And then in parallel, the law concerning JAXA was amended last year. It is to bring new objective set by Japanese space law in 2008 to be implemented by JAXA as a space agency. So now JAXA can actually contribute to national security for peaceful purposes and diplomacy and industry. And so it makes, and also for such purpose, new ministers are added as supervising minister for JAXA, which is Prime Minister and the Minister for Ministry of Economy and Trade. So you can see. Sorry, this is from the brochure of JAXA. This is very small, but please. This upper side is the governance scheme of Japan. Recent Japanese regime for space activities, and then cabinet headed by Prime Minister, and also we have 3 ministry supervising JAXA. New one is Ministry of Economy. So now JAXA is expected to, JAXA is defined as a core implementation agency to provide technical support for overall space activities of the Japanese government, not only R&D but also the utilization of space infrastructure for the governmental purposes. So now I turn to the brief explanation of the newest basic plan on space policy. Under this space policy, JAXA is implementing it as a core space agency. So nowadays, Japanese government is more focusing on utilizing space as a social infrastructure for government purposes. And also, they are also focusing in the capability of autonomous space activities to maintain core technology like launcher or satellites for the sustainable space activities. And they set 3 priority subjects. One is national security and disaster management, and second is industrial development, and third is frontier areas space science and manned space activities. And my final information for the audience is nowadays Japanese domestic regulation system is not yet settled. So, but in 2010, a governmental study group has proposed to the government the contents of the National Legislation Act. That is main subject. One is, of course, authorization and supervision for private sectors, which is under the Article 6 of Outer Space Treaty. They are imaging launch activity, procurement of launch by private entities, and re-entry from the space, and operation of space objects, that is satellite operator, and also operator for launching site. Nowadays, today, only JAXA, governmental agency, is a operator of the launch sites, but maybe in the future, for the space travel age, some company will operate space launch sites. So. And second one is liability. So of course, strict liability for third party, and then they set a system for insurance as an obligation, and also regime for compensation from the private sector to the government. The industrialization and manned space activities. The detail, and also please show, another sheets for the details of the basic Japanese space plan starting from this April. That is today's information for the audience. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, any question or comment? Any comment?
So I have no question to you. You briefly and so make a very so precise information for Japanese space policy present. So just I.
Closer.
Okay. And so just I put some words in general. So this is a very good occasion to share the information about each nation's space policy and so legal systems or something like that. So this planet concept is very unique in my understanding. This is so a kind of private base and so academic freedom base. Not so formal, negotiation between governments. As you know well, also between government, so relationships sometimes might stop by some serious political circumstances or something like that. But so by using this kind of split up private society, so we can continue discussion or information sharing. Even after such a kind of severe political condition. And also for the our friends coming from the developing countries who want to their national space activities more and more, such private society can help you to be given us very good information, enough communication, or sometimes private suggestions for what to do in future. Just not questions, just something, putting some words.
Yeah, thank you very much for the comment about the overall concept of the kind of the platform we'd like to establish. Any question or the kind of the comment to the overall concept of this planet or the kind of issue what we should deal with in the future? If you have any input or comment to us, and that might be yeah, please.
I would be interested to know how you are going to plan to expand the network. Is there a plan to, for instance, communicate this initiative to the UN COPOS member states from Asia Pacific, or do you have a kind of university network or something like that? There is in the United Nations, as you may know, a publication on education of space law, which sort of gives a catalogue of universities around the world where space law is being taught. That might be an interesting interesting source, or do you have any specific plans in how to expand the network? I would be curious.
Yeah, thank you for the question. And so far, we are trying to be kind of the network of the personal experts, individuals working in this field. So, as the criteria of the membership mentioned, there are two possible memberships. The experts belong to the university or research institute in the Asia-Pacific region, or anyone who are involved in the study of the space policy or space law of the Asia-Pacific. So it means that if the expert is located in Europe or anywhere, if he has interest in the space policy issue in this region, they can be a part of that. So one basic idea is to try to expand that kind of personal, like expert level network incrementally. But that's the current basic idea. But of course, on the other hand, we try to think of the possibility of the kind of the institutional linkages with the existing framework to be part of the international law study network, or to be part of the try to set up some cooperation with the UN OSA, or that kind of thing. We also are thinking as a next step. So still, it's very open, but we also have to be quick. But we try to develop that kind of policy also in the next phase.
And is it also something that is open for students, or is it more really at the researcher level, so more at the staff level in academics, for instance?
At this moment, basically for the researcher, but we are not necessarily close to the student studying in this area. This is a very important future candidate for the expert, especially for this emerging area. So we'd like to set up an opportunity also for them to be part of that network. I think that's also a very important thing. Yes,
this is kind of initiative from individual professors, but we would like to link to IAC activities and also activity for capacity building. I think nowadays not only technology and science, but also this field, capacity building is very important. So this is initiative from the individuals in Asia-Pacific region, but we would like to link to IAC activities and also UN OSA activity if possible.
Actually, at this moment, the next the workshop we are thinking that we set up a kind of a workshop in the APR SAC in the Hanoi, Vietnam this December. So maybe we try to focus more on the specific issue next time. Maybe the capacity building or the interface issue between the international space law and the domestic regulation we will have in Vietnam. So we'd like to use that opportunity to focus on that kind of area. So that's what we are thinking, and we'd like to try to involve the more broader participants in that framework, I think. Yeah. Any other question or comment? Okay, so already all the places are already in the deconstruction phase, so somehow we can survive. And I was already warned that every electricity will be shut at 2 p.m. So we should finish anyway before that. But anyway, today we are focusing more on the general issue. But at least we can understand that. The kind of technological issue is somehow embedded with the social issue. The space as the tool for the social development explained by Professor Murti might be a very comprehensive framework for that. And also in the case of Russia, now we have a more transparent key policy point. And also, as Ustomi-san mentioned, that the Japanese government is now pushing for the social utilization of the space technology. I have to bring that dimension to the space policy. It's a very big topic, but I think this can be a very important, can be a background for thinking about the future concrete issue. So now I think we'd like to close this session, and also maybe we'd like to announce that as you see on the back side of this program, 4 points we have mentioned about how to become a member. So if you are interested in, we are an open organization, so please send Nagai-san. Nagai-san is the secretary of this platform. So please send him the name or the CV and interest. And then we can communicate by the email or the website. We'd like to expand the kind of community of experts in this area. Anything to add? Or is it okay?
Thank you very much for coming today. As Professor Hashimoto space policy and law and academic network for Asia Pacific. So my email address is on the draft chat. So send it.
Okay, so thank you very much for participating for the nearly final session of this IAC, and we'd like to keep in touch with you and we'd like to develop the cooperation. Thank you very much.
Expertise is really going to help us to get organized. So again, you can find resources in surprising places, but don't leave any stones unturned. So that's my presentation. So, Geir, do we have time for questions or?
Yes, absolutely. I think that any question that goes directly on the presentation of Jeff, this is the time to come up with it. Yes, Brett.
Jeff, one very quick question. Right now, 1 year out from your Congress, how many hours a week are you putting in on this as opposed to other things, and how many hours is Lynn putting in, please?
Well, Lynn puts in the time sort of as and when required right now.
Right.
We're
How do you
here
see
out,
that
so
ramping up?
the ramping up hasn't really happened yet. Well, there have been a couple of peaks. There was one peak in the preparation of the proposal.
Yep.
There was another peak around the Paris Spring meetings because that's when the decision, unusually in this case, was taken. So I'm spending, my time sort of ebbs and flows as well. Some weeks I'll spend maybe 4 days out of 5 on the Congress.
Yep.
Other times it might be a day.
Yeah.
So it really depends.
We've had to go out and hire another person to backfill for Jeff in the CASI organization.
Yeah.
That's right. What we did was we hired a person whose job and focus will be to be involved in communication, all aspects of communication about the Congress. So the Congress budget is accommodating her time.
Sure.
However, she won't be spending all her time on the Congress. So what time she's not doing stuff on the Congress, she's helping out at the CASI headquarters, and it's a good thing.
Sure.
But her entire time will be attributed to the Congress. And the fact that Lockheed, the arrangement we have with Lockheed is as comprehensive as it is, has actually provided us with some early cash flow.
Yes.
And that's another problem that you may face financially, is cash flow. And that's something you need to try to get your arms around. You probably won't be getting much going on, unless you can sort of strong-arm your exhibitors and sponsors. You probably won't be getting much money coming in until you've opened registration. So that'll give you maybe a 6-month window, let's say from February until the Congress. You may have expenses to incur prior to that. For example, just deposits alone. For a conference center like this, you could easily be spending $250,000, something like that. They might want a deposit of some significant proportion of that to hold it for you. So you're going to need to think about what
conference organizer.
You bet.
How do you divide your responsibilities? At what stage do they come in, and are there any lessons learned that you can share with us from previous conferences?
I'm going to put a slide up, if I may, Mr. Chairman.
Please.
We've contracted with has an international reputation for excellence. They have offices in 12 cities around the world, and they really know what they're doing. But there are quite a few of those around. I know that Orna has selected a different PCO in European congresses. You're going to get an organization that understands the special way that European congresses like to be done and how Europeans like their stuff done. So, the brand of coffee, whether you have cream or milk, stupid little things like that can, well, not stupid, but perhaps trivial things, I think they're important, but trivial things like that can make the difference between a conference that people have enjoyed and what. So, our main governing body is called the Council. So, everything is under the Council. And this is what represents the interests of the members. That's why it's at the top. have an oversight committee that's essentially the executive committee of CASI that reports to the council and interfaces between the council and the actual line organization of the Congress. Over here we have the International Program Committee, the IPC. The Congress of the year in question, the lead chair of our Congress, and he will have as an understudy the representative from the Jerusalem Congress. In this case, Virendra is actually the understudy of Li Ning. Ironically, Virendra was the IPC co-chair for our Congress in 2004, so he had actually done it before Li Ning did. So together they were a pretty good team. The green area indicates the local organizing committee proper. So you can see this square here. So at the top of the local organizing committee is the person who takes the blame for everything. The credit goes here, and here, or here, Ron. The blame goes here. So now, and here's Lynn Bannon, who I was speaking about. Here's my project manager. I've taken on the principal responsibility for sponsorship and exhibit sales, although our co-chairs have a significant role to play, and we hope they discharge it by sending their influential friends our way and trying to encourage them to be exhibitors and or sponsors. So, and then when it comes to liaison with the two other key organizations, the International Academy of Astronautics and the International Institute of Space Law, the liaison, again, from there is on my plate, mainly because I know the people. So that's why. But both of these come down to Lynn, and Lynn is really the line manager of the Congress. And you can see that one of her direct reports is the DCO, right? So she's got all these other things. So here's AIAA. So Tom Sheridan, Lynn will be working with Tom to make sure that AIAA, we understand what's going on with that and it's happening. Of course, I'll be involved as well. Student and Young Professionals Program, we don't have a name for that yet, but we will shortly. Lockheed Martin, because of their industry anchor sponsorship role, and the fact that we want to make sure that they have as much of a visible role to play in the Congress as possible, we have them actively on it in every one of our local organizing committee meetings. So there's the PCO right there. Sponsor and the exhibitor liaison will be Lynn's. Opening ceremony, this is a big deal. You need to think about the opening ceremony as probably the biggest deal of the whole Congress. It's your chance to make a big splash, a big statement. Now, there's one line coming out of here, right? The only line that connects this whole